Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we are learning Daf Nun Tes of Masechta Shabbis. Let us do a quick overview before we begin. So the page begins with a continuation of the discussion that we ended with yesterday, which was if you have this bell for these little kiddos, and the point is that they are able to contract tumah once they have a clapper in them. If you remove the clapper, then they maintain their state of tumah. And the question is, why? Didn't you break it? Shouldn't it lose tumah? So we're going to see the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan regarding that question. Then we are within that discussion. We will end it off with a discussion about can animal shoes contract tumah? I'm not going to tell you. You're just going to have to wait. Then we're going to talk about articles of clothing, jewelry kind of things, going out with them on Shabbos. Well, Bigadol, that is our daf today. So let's get right into it. So remember, tumah and tahara is where we begin. So Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Hol V'Roi L'Gameh Bo Mayim L'Tinok. Since you can use it to give water to a baby. Remember, what are we talking about? We have this bell, okay? Now this bell is used, I guess you would put it on a clothing of children. That way you'd be able to hear whenever they move around. Sounds exciting. Now, we say because the point of the bell is to make noise, so it will not be ra'ui l'kabel tumah. It will not be able to be makabel tumah until there's a clapper in the bell. And then we say that once there's a clapper in the bell, okay, if it becomes tameh, let's say, so then simply removing the clapper from the bell will not enable us to say, oh, okay, it's broken, it's no longer a kli, therefore it's tahor. Okay, and the question is, why not? The question is, when I remove the clapper, why don't we consider it to be broken and unusable and therefore, tahor? So why don't we say that? So Rabbi Yochanan says, so yesterday we saw Abaye's opinion, which was that, well, because it's too easy to just put it right back. We had Rava's opinion, which he also then quoted from Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina, that, well, since you could still theoretically bang it against some earthenware and it'll make noise, so even though it's not going to be making noise in the normal way, it's not considered completely broken, and we need it to be completely broken in order for it to be tahor. And now we have Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, which is that, well, since you can still use it for something else, okay? Sure, I can't use it as a bell anymore because it's missing its clapper, but a bell is kind of, if you flip it over, it's like a cup, and I could put water in the cup. I can now use it to feed a baby. So therefore, it's still usable, and therefore, it's still going to be tameh. That is Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Now, the Gemara asks, Rabbi Yochanan, lo bai me'ein melach rishona? But one second, doesn't Rabbi Yochanan require that in order for something to be tameh, it has to be usable in the same way that it was used initially? Meaning, we have this bell, okay? The bell was initially used as a bell to make noise, okay? Now, the clapper is gone, so it can't make noise anymore. And now we're alleging that Rabbi Yochanan holds that, but you could still use it for something completely different. You could put water into it and feed it to a baby, but would that really work for Rabbi Yochanan? That since you can use it for something completely different, it would remain tameh? Ve'atanya, we learn in a brisa. V'chol akli asher yeshiv alav v'gomer. Okay, this is talking about tumas midras of a zav. There are a few things, maybe let's give a shtickle introduction before we do this, okay? So, a zav is an avatuma, right? This is this dude who saw some kind of emission, 2 or 3 times, and now he's a zav, he's an avatuma. One of the things about a zav is what's called tumas midras, okay? Tumas mishkav umoshav, which means that anything that he sits on becomes tameh, not just to be an ava, not just to be a rishon tumah, but it actually becomes an ava tumah just like him. Okay, fine. Now, there is another concept which is called amod v'naisa melachtenu harishona. Okay, get up so that we can do amod v'naisa melachtenu. Right. So get up so that we can do our work. Meaning, in order for something to be tamei midras, it would have to be something that its purpose is sitting. So for example, if a zav were to sit on a couch, so the couch would become an avatuma just like him. Okay? However, what if a zav were to take a sa'ah, as the Gemara is going to mention, right? A measure. Takes a measurement that it's enough to measure out a sa'ah's worth of grain or something like that. It's this, imagine like a cup that, is big enough that you could theoretically flip it over and sit on it. So now we're going to say that if a zav were to sit on this measure that you can flip over and sit on it, that measure would not become tamei mishkav umoshav, would not become an avatuma. Because, let's say you'll take this measure, you'll flip it over, and you'll sit on it, and some guy will come up to you and say, hey, you're sitting on that measure, I need that measure to measure out some grain. So because this is something that is not specifically made to be sat on, okay, and it's something that somebody can come up to you and say, hey, can you please not sit on that, I need to use it for what it's intended to be used for, so then it won't be makabel tumah, okay? So that is what's called amod v'nais melachtenu. That if it's something that somebody will say to the zav, like, hey, get up, I need to use it for what it's intended to be used for, so then it is not susceptible to tumas mishkav umoshav. Now, we're also going to discuss, does this concept of amod v'nais melachtenu apply to also tumas maga? What does that mean? So let's say you have an object, okay? Let's just use as an object, as an example, the same sa'ah, the same measure, okay? And let's say this measure, this sa'ah, touched a dead body. Now a dead body is an avi avosa tumah. It is the highest level of tumah you can possibly get. Great. Now, let's say this sa'ah touches a dead body, comes into contact with a dead body. So that sa'ah now becomes an avatuma. Okay, it's now tameh. Fine. Now, what happens if this sa'ah now breaks in half? So theoretically, now that this measure is broken in half, you could still use it. Maybe you can't use it obviously to measure out a sa'ah because it's broken in half. However, maybe you could put a little bit of food in it. Like maybe it still has, it's intact enough that maybe you could put a little bit of food in there and give it to an animal can eat out of it, whatever it might be. There are things that you could still do with it, but you can't do its original thing, which is to measure out, use it as a measure to measure out a sah's worth of whatever you want to be measuring. So, if we apply amod v'na'aseh melachtenu to also like something that became tamei from a mace, well, that would mean that in order for it when it breaks, and for us to say that it's no longer tameh, right? So if we apply amod v'na'aseh melachtenu, that means that even once it's broken, in order for it to retain tumah, it would still have to be usable in the same way that it was usable initially. Okay? And therefore, in the case of this sa'ah, once it breaks and it's no longer usable to measure out a sa'ah, right? Because it's broken. So therefore it would be tahor. Because you can't, you can no longer theoretically say, hey, send me this thing, I need to measure out a sa'ah. But if we don't apply the concept of amod v'na'aseh melachtenu to, tumas mace, something that became tamei from a mace, well then, even though you can no longer use this broken sa'ah to measure a sa'ah because it's broken, however, you could still theoretically put a little bit of food in there and give it to an animal, so it's usable. So we would say, okay, well then it remains tamei because it's still usable. Even though it might not be usable for the initial purpose, it's still usable, okay? So this is the idea of amod v'na'aseh melachtenu, right? Like, hey, we want to use it for its initial purpose, okay? And how that would be applied to tumas midras as well as to tumas maga. Okay, that should suffice for now. Okay, there are other details, but I think that should suffice for now. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan said over here that this bell, okay, once you've removed the clapper from it, it will still be tameh, since you could use it for something completely different, right? Not its initial purpose, which is as a bell, but you can use it to give water to epis a baby, okay? And Rabbi Yochanan wants to say, therefore it remains tamei. Okay? So he's basically saying, since it's usable for something different than its initial purpose, right? And just, if you can kind of hear already the idea of amod v'naseh melachtenu, right? We're saying that we don't seem to be concerned with amod v'naseh melachtenu arishona, right? We don't seem to be saying, well, since it's unusable for its original purpose, then it's considered broken. We seem to be saying that even though it is not usable for its original intention, it would nonetheless remain tamei, right? So let's see. So Rabbi Yochanan lobai me'ein melacha rishona. So Rabbi Yochanan does not require that in order for something to retain its tumah, it has to still be usable in the same way that it was usable initially. Ve'atanya v'chol hakli asher yeshev alav v'gomer. So if you have a zav, okay, and remember the zav is in av hatuma, and anything that he sits on becomes an av hatuma. And the pasuk says, "V'chol hakli asher yeshev alav v'gomer." Anything that the zav sits on will become tamei. Yachol kaf sa'a v'yashev alea. Is it possible that if you took a measure that holds a sa'a and he flipped it over and sat on it, kaf tarka v'yashev alea, or if he took a kli that holds half of a sa'a. A tarkav means tar is tray and kav is one kav, so meaning 2 kavs plus 1 kav is 3 kavs, and it's 6 kavs in a sa'a, so therefore it's half a sa'a. So if he takes this measurement and flips it over and sits on it, yehei tamei, is it possible that these sort of makeshift, these improvised stools would be tamei? Tamulomer asher yeshev alav azav. Therefore it says, that which the zav will sit on, misha miyuchad liyeshiva. It has to be something that is specific for sitting on. Yatzazeh she'omrim lo amod v'naseh melachtenu. To exclude something like a sa'a that, somebody's going to come and say, hey, excuse me, mister, can you please not sit on my measuring cup? I need to measure something with that. So therefore it would not be able to contract tumah. Now, V'Rab Elazar Omer, says Rabbi Elazar, b'midrasos omrim amod v'naseh melachtenu. So now Rabbi Elazar says, this concept of amod v'naseh melachtenu only applies to tumas midras of a zav, or maybe tumas midras of other things as well. But Rabbi Elazar, such as Anida, there's tumas midras. I think maybe Mitzorah as well. So Rabbi Elazar says that this idea of amod v'naseh melachtenu applies to midras, right? It applies to like when you sit on something. Ve'ein omrim b'tmei meis amod v'naseh melachtenu. However, we do not apply the concept of amod v'naseh melachtenu to something that became tamei from a mace. Okay? And therefore, if you have this sa'a measure thing that touched a dead body, and now it's tamei, and then it breaks in half. So we don't say, well, in order for it to be considered usable, it would have to be usable in the same way that it was usable initially. Therefore, we don't care how it was used initially. And therefore, the fact of the matter is that even though it's broken in half, since you can use it to put food in front of an animal, it's still considered usable, and therefore it would remain tamei. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan Amar. But what's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion here? Af omrim b'tmei meis amod v'naseh melachtenu. Rabbi Yochanan says that even when it comes to something that became tamei from a mace, we do say that, we do take into account its initial purpose and how it was originally used. And it was originally used, if we're talking about a sa'a measure that got tamei, that touched a corpse, it was originally used to measure a sa'a's worth of whatever you're measuring, and it can no longer be used for that purpose. So even though it's used for, a new purpose, right, to give food to an animal, let's say, however, you can no longer say, amod v'naseh melachtenu arishona, you can no longer say, hey, I want to use this measurement for its original purpose, which was to measure a sa'a's worth of stuff. So therefore, it would be considered broken, regardless of the fact that it's still usable for something else. It would be considered broken, and it would be tahor. New. So if that's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, well then tying it back into the bell, well, the fact of the matter is, sure, initially when it became tamei, it was completely usable as a bell. now you remove the clapper, so even though you can use it to feed water to a baby, but you can no longer say, I want to use it as a bell anymore, which is amod v'naseh melachtenu, like, hey, I want to use this thing as a bell. Well, you can't use it as a bell. The clapper is missing. So even though you can use it to give water to a baby, it doesn't matter. It's going to be considered broken and it's not going to be tumah anymore. So this is a problem. On the one hand, we see that Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is that amod v'naseh melachtenu applies to to things that became tameh from a mace, right? Things that became themselves tameh tumas maga. So he's saying we do apply amod v'naseh melachtenu, and if it's not usable for its initial, in its initial way, it would be considered broken and it would be tahara. Yet he seems to be saying that even though this bell is no longer usable as a bell, it's still going to be tameh since you can use it to give water to a baby. What do we do with this? What do we do with this? We can't go on. Do we just give up? Maybe we should just give up. Maybe we should just give up. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't make any sense. Let's just give up. But the Gemara doesn't want to give up. The Gemara doesn't want to give up. The Gemara wants to try and solve this issue and make it make sense for us. And you know how the Gemara does that? Ipuch kamaisa. Okay. So the Gemara says, don't worry, people. Just flip around the earlier part. What's the earlier part? So, remembering back to what we said at the end of the day yesterday, right? Rava's opinion. So Rava said that since you could still use this bell essentially for its initial purpose, which is to knock on earthenware, and it'll make noise. So since you could still use it to make noise, even though it's not its normal way, it's not going to be with the clapper, but you can, knock it against something, it'll make noise. So it's not considered completely broken. And since it's not considered completely broken and completely unusable as a bell, so therefore it remains tameh. And then we said that Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina supports Rava. So what the Gemara is suggesting is that you flip around Rabbi Yochanan's opinion with Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina's opinion and say that it's Rabbi Yochanan who says that the bell remains tameh without its clapper since you could knock it against something. So it's still used in the same way that it was used initially. Amod v'naseh melachtenu. Whereas Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina is the one who says that since you can use it for a different purpose, which is to give water to a baby, it would remain tameh. Okay, and that would work. And now Rabbi Yochanan is consistent with his opinion of Amod v'naseh melachtenu, that in order for something to be for something to remain tameh, it would have to be still usable in the same way that it was usable initially. Now the Gemara says, "Umay chazis de ipchas kamaisa ipuch basraisa," but the Gemara asks, how come you decided that it was the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Yochanan that you had to flip around to say that Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says that you knock the bell against the earthenware? Why don't you flip around the later machlokas, the machlokas between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan, and say that Rabbi Yochanan does not actually hold of Amod v'naseh melachtenu when it comes to Tmei Meis, right? And therefore, since something is still usable for another purpose, it would remain tameh, and we could say that therefore, by the bell, since it's usable for giving a baby water, it would remain tameh. So the Gemara says you won't be able to do that because we already know that Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is in fact that we say Amod v'naseh melachtenu by just regular objects that are tameh. Hashamina leil Rabbi Yochanan, because we already know that Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is dibai me'ein melacha rishona, that he does in fact require this thing to still be usable in the same way that it was used initially for it to remain tameh. Ditnan, as we learn in a Mishnah in Kalim, sandal shel behema shamateches tameh. So if you have a shoe for an animal, okay, and we're not talking about a horseshoe that you nail into the animal. We're talking about, some kind of shoe that you put around its hooves and it could theoretically fall off. And it did theoretically fall off. It fell off. Okay, so now the question is this shoe that is not on an animal, can it be makabel tumah? Okay? Now, Rashi points out that, in general, something that is only made for an animal, strictly for an animal, will not be makabel tumah. Okay? So, for example, we mentioned the bell yesterday of an animal. that it can be makabel tumah, that's only because it's really usable for humans, right? It's not for the animal, it's really for us to be able to hear the animal. But this shoe is really only for the animal, right? So therefore, mistama, it shouldn't be makabel tumah. And the Brisa is saying, and this Mishnah is saying, sandal shobei shamateches tameh. But we're saying that this shoe of an animal, that if it's made out of metal, it is able to be makabel tumah. So therefore, the question the Gemara wants to know, l'may chazi, what human purpose is this animal shoe fit for that it should be able to be makabel tumah? So Amar Rav, so Rav said, Roi lishtos b'mayim b'milchama. So Rav says, look, because l'mayse, if you're in war and it's a shas adachak, and this animal shoe is the only thing you got, you could theoretically drink water out of it. So therefore, it's Moshe l'kabatum. Reb Chanina Amar, says the holy Reb Chanina, Roi lasuch bo shemen b'milchama, that you could theoretically, have some oil in this shoe in wartime, in sort of a shas adachak, and you could pour out oil from this shoe and use it to rub into your skin. Reb Yochanan Amar, b'shasha boreach min akrav manicho b'raglav v'ratz al kotzim v'al barkanan. If Nebuch, this Yid, was in battle and it's a shvach matzav, things are not looking good, he doesn't even have shoes on, and he's running away from the enemies. Not a very good thing. So the only thing he's got is these animal shoes. And Rabbi Yochanan says, theoretically, in such a terrible situation, a person would be able to take these animal shoes, put them on his own feet, and run away so that he doesn't get thorns and stuff in his feet. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan's opinion in terms of determining why this animal shoe should be able to be makabel tumah, while Rav says you could drink from it, Rabbi Chanina says you can pour oil from it, Rabbi Yochanan stays true to its initial purpose, which is putting on, your feet. Initially it was put on an animal's feet, and he's saying that it's mukshel l'kabel tumah because you could theoretically put it on your own feet if you mamish had to run away. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan's opinion when determining tumah for something is making sure that it was used for its initial purpose, okay? And that is why we could be assured that it was, that Rabbi Yochanan did not say that this bell remains tameh since you can use it for a completely different purpose, which is to feed a baby. In that case, he would say it would be tahor. However, we can assume, just flip it around and say that Rabbi Yochanan is the one who said that since you could still knock it against earthenware and it will make noise, that is why it remains tameh. Now, the Gemara wants to know, my bin Rav Rab Chanina, what's the nafkamina between Rav and Rab Chanina? Rav says that that this animal shoe is able to be makabel tumah because you could drink from it. Rab Chanina says that it's because you could put oil in it. So you could benayu demayis. What if it's mamish disgusting? So if it's mamish disgusting, so Rav's thing about drinking from it is not really relevant because you're not going to drink from this thing if it's mamish disgusting. And therefore it would not be able to makabel tumah. Whereas Rab Chanina, I guess, would say you theoretically could still put oil in there. Okay. Bein Rab Yochanan Rab Chanina iki benayu diyakir. And what about nafkamina between Rab Yochanan, who says that theoretically you could run away with these shoes, and Rab Chanina, who says you could put oil? Is that according to Rab Yochanan? If it's too heavy, well then you can't really run away with it, so it would remain. It would not be makabel tumah. Whereas according to Rab Chanina, you would still be able to have oil in there. All right. So continues the Mishnah. V'lo be'ir shel zav. So a woman should not go out to the Rishus Harabim on Shabbos wearing an ir shel zahav, a golden city of Jerusalem. No, well, just a golden city. All right. Might be ir shel zahav. What is this golden city? So I'm Rabbi Babachanan Rabbi Yochanan Yerushalayim de Daiva. It is a golden Jerusalem. Kida'avale Rabbi Akiva ledvisu. It's like Rabbi Akiva made for his wife. What was her name? Rachel, right? The daughter of Kalba Savua. So he made her a Jerusalem of gold. Apparently it was some kind of like tiara-like thing that you could wear, and it had a Jerusalem of gold on there. Sounds really fancy, right? Sounds really, really fancy. Tana Rabbanan. Lo seitze isha be'ir shel zav. Okay. A woman should not go out to Rishus Harabim wearing an ir shel zav. Reb Meir says that, and if she does, well then she will be liable to bring a korban chatas. Okay? So the Chachamim say she should not go out wearing this Ir Shel Zav, and if she does, well then it's patur aval aser. Okay, so unlike Rabbi Meir says she would have to bring a korban, the Chachamim say she wouldn't have to bring a korban, but nonetheless she shouldn't do it. She shouldn't go out with this Ir Shel Zav. Rabbi Eliezer Omer says, the holy Rabbi Eliezer, Yotza Isha B'Ir Shel Zav L'chatchila. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says that she may go out wearing this Ir Shel Zav, 100% it's cool. Now, b'may kamiflige. What is sort of the motive behind the three different opinions? Rabbi Meir Savar Masuihu. Okay, so Rabbi Meir holds that this Ir Shel Zav is considered a burden. And if it's a burden, then you can't go out to Rishus Harabim with it. And therefore it's carrying. And therefore, you can be chayav a korban chatas. V'Rabbanan tzavei ta'achsheru. The Rabbanan hold it's an adornment. And since it's an adornment, so gezuntheit, you can go out with it to Rishus Harabim. However, dil mashalfa umechavya le ve'asya le asuye. However, the Chachamim say that even though it's an adornment and me'ikar adin, she would be allowed to go out to Rishus Harabim with it. We advise her not to because we are concerned that maybe she will take it off in order to show her friends, and then she will carry it Daled Amos in Rishus Harabim. And therefore they say it's patur aval aser, right? Well, you won't have to bring a korban chatas, don't do it. Rabbi Eliezer Savar, whereas Rabbi Eliezer says that it's completely mutter because man darka lemeifak b'ir shel zav, who normally goes out with such fancy jewelry, isha chashuva, a very important woman, v'isha chashuva lo mishalfa mechavya, and if she's so important that she has an Ir Shel Zav, she's also not the kind of person who's going to be taking off her Ir Shel Zav to just kind of like show people. No, she keeps it on her head and lets people see it that way, and therefore it's mutter to go out because it's an adornment and there's no concern about carrying it. Okay. Klila. Friends, what about a klila? So a klila is also some kind of thing that a woman would wear on her forehead, okay? It would go across her forehead. Now, there are two types of klilas. One is made out of like gold and silver, okay? That's kind of the fancier version. And the other one is made out of fabric. I'm sure it's also very, very fancy. It's made out of fabric, and there's like different kind of gems and gold and silver and all sorts of stuff like that woven into the fabric. So that also sounds pretty fancy, okay? Great. So when it comes to this klila, so Rav Asr, Shmuel Shari, okay? So Rav says Asr, Shmuel says mutter, okay? Rav says don't go out with this klila to Rishus Harabim on Shabbos. Shmuel says no problem, okay? Now, the Gemara says the anischa, so if we're talking about this klila that's made out of gold or silver, so kuli amalo plige de Asr, everyone would agree that you would not be allowed to go out with it because we're concerned that she might, because it's so fancy, she might take it off to show her friends. Ki plige, where is the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel? Where does Shmuel essentially say that it's mutter? And Rav, of course, says it's asr. Da aruksa, with the version of this klila that is made out of fabric with these expensive things woven into them. Marsavar anischa ikr. So Rav says, look, the main thing in this fabric one is not the fabric. It's the gold and silver and gems that are woven into it. And therefore, we're concerned that she might take it off to show her friends. Umarsavar aruksa ikr. Whereas Shmuel says, no, when it's made out of fabric, it's permitted because the main thing there is the fabric, and therefore it's not as the fabric isn't as fancy, and therefore we're not concerned that she's going to take it off to show her friends. Fine. Now Rav Ashi masni lekula. So now Rav Ashi teaches this lekula. Meaning, whereas the way that we just explained the machlokas, it's like, okay, if it's anischa, if it's metal, everyone says that it's aser. And if it is fabric, so then, Rav still says it's aser, and that's the one place where Shmuel says it's mutter. Rav Ashi explains this machlokas in sort of a more permissible way. The aruksa kuli amalo pligi deshari. That if this klila is made out of fabric, everyone agrees that it will be permitted because we're not concerned that she's going to take it off and show her friends. Ki plige de anischa. But the machlokes is when it comes to this klila that is made out of pure gold and silver. Marsavar dil mashalfo mechavia. Rav in that case is concerned that she might take it off in order to show her friends because it's really fancy. Ve'asila asuya, and then she might end up carrying it 4 amos. Umarsavar, where Shmuel holds mandar kelemefach bechlila, who is going out with such a fancy klila made out of gold and silver. Isha chashuva, a very important woman. Ve'isha chashuva lo shalfo mechavia. And an important woman is going to leave it on her head. She's not just taking it off to show her friends. That wouldn't be, that wouldn't be her style. Okay. Zeu. So now, Amrle Rav Shmuel Bar Bachana le Rav Yosef. So now Rav Shmuel Bar Bachana says to Rav Yosef, Beferish Amart on Mishmei de Rav Klila Shari. Now, so Rav Shmuel Bar Bachana says to Rav Yosef, look, you told us that, according to Rav, a klila is mutter. Now, the only way that Rav would say that a klila is mutter is if it is this aruksa, this fabric klila, according to the way that Rav Ashi is learning it, that everyone agrees that the fabric one would be mutter. So that is essentially a support for Rav Ashi's view on the machlokas. Amrle l'Rav. Oh, so they said to Rav, also gavaraba aricha linarda umatla. Interesting. So a very tall rabbi came to Narda from Eretz Yisrael, and he's limping. Okay. Vidarash, and he said, Klila Shari, and guess what he said? He said that a Klila is permitted. Okay. Amar, so now Rav said, wow, man gava rabba aricha deitla. Who could this rabbi possibly be? Who could possibly be this great rabbi who is very tall and has a limp? Levi. This must be Levi. Okay? And as the Gemara, Rashi directs us to the Gemara in Sukkah, that says that Levi was one time doing some kind of bow in front of Rebbe, and he somehow caused permanent damage to his body, and from then on he had a limp. Okay, fine. So Rav says, okay, Levi must have gotten to Bavel, he must have gotten to Narda. Now, Rav was in Surah, okay, Shmuel was in Narda, and I guess they were reporting to Rav that in Naharda, this very tall rabbi with a limp has arrived. And Rav concluded, Levi has arrived. How cool. Levi has come from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. But that's not it. There's more implications that Rav can learn from hearing that some tall rabbi with a limp came. Shma mina nach nafshid Rabbi Apis v'yasid Reb Chanina Bereisha. That also must mean that how come all of a sudden Levi came to Bavel? It must mean that Rabbi Apis has died. And now Reb Chanina is the Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, Levi no longer had anybody to sit next to, and therefore he came here. So Rashi explains what happened. Basically, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he was on his deathbed, he instructed that Reb Chanina Bar Chama should be the Rosh Yeshiva. Okay. Now the thing is that Rabbi Apis was still alive. He was older than Rabbi Chanina. He may not have been greater than Rabbi Chanina, but he was older than Rabbi Chanina. Okay. Now, or maybe he was older and greater, but whatever it is, basically, Rabbi Chanina was not going to immediately become Rosh Yeshiva, even though Rabbi instructed that he should, because Rabbi Apis was kind of, older than him. So what happened was, Rabbi Apis became the Rosh Yeshiva first, okay? Now, for whatever reason, I don't know, it sounds like it was maybe political, whatever it is, Rabbi Chanina didn't want to go into the Beis HaMedrash when Rabbi Apis was the Rosh Yeshiva, so he would stay outside of the Beis HaMedrash and learn. And then Levi, out of kavod, out of respect for Rabbi Chanina, who was sitting outside of the Beis HaMedrash and learning, he would sit and learn with Rabbi Chanina. Okay? So now, when Rav heard that Levi came to Bavel, okay, so he concluded, what has changed? How come all of a sudden Levi came to Bavel? What must have happened is Rabbi Apis died. Rabbi Chanina now became the Rosh Yeshiva over there in Bavel, in Eretz Yisrael. and he's no longer sitting outside the Beis Medrash by himself. So Levi figured that, okay, now I don't have to sit with Levi in the Beis Medrash anymore, outside the Beis Medrash anymore. I don't know what I just said, but Levi figured that he no longer needs to sit with Rabbi Chanina outside the Beis Medrash anymore. So Levi figured, let me just go to Eretz Yisrael. So this was all these kind of conclusions that Rav was drawing from the fact that a tall person with a limp came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, right? So I'm going to read that again. So Shmamina nach nafshid Rabbi Apis. So this must mean that Rabbi Apis, who was the Rosh Yeshiva before Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama got a chance to be Rosh Yeshiva, he must have died. V'yas Rabbi Chanina Bereisha, which means that Rabbi Chanina is now the Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, Levi no longer had to sit outside the Beis Medrash with Rabbi Chanina anymore, because Rabbi Chanina is now the Rosh Yeshiva. And Levi didn't necessarily feel obligated to Rabbi Chanina that, you should remain in the Beis Medrash in Eretz Yisrael with Rabbi Chanina as the Rosh Yeshiva. So he decided, let me now come to Bavel. I guess there were good, solid academies in Bavel, so he figured, let me come to Bavel now. Okay, that was what Rav concluded. How do you know that that's what happened? Maybe what happened was Rabbi Chanina died. Rabbi Chanina died, and because he's dead, he's no longer sitting outside of the Beis Medrash. Levi no longer had to sit with him because he's dead. So Levi came over to Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Apis, to Bavel. But Rabbi Apis is still alive and kicking. So, v'lo hava lei inish Levi the Mesa of Gabi because ilacha, right? And since Rabbi Chanina is dead, Levi didn't have to sit with him outside the Beis Medrash anymore, so he came here to Bavel. So the Gemara says, no, that can't be the case, because Isa Rabbi Chanina shachiv, because if that's the case that Rabbi Chanina died, well then Levi the Rabbi Apis makaf have a kayifle. If it's true that Rabbi Chanina died, well, Levi would have stayed in Eretz Yisrael because he would have, he was cool with Rabbi Apis being the Rosh Yeshiva. For whatever reason, Rabbi Chanina didn't feel comfortable with Rabbi Apis being the Rosh Yeshiva, so he would stay outside the Beis Medrash, and Levi would just keep him company. But if Rabbi Chanina would have died, Levi would have no problem going into the Beis Medrash with Rabbi Apis as the Rosh Yeshiva. He was older than him, he was greater than him. Right, so therefore, so that can't be. Vesu, Rabbi Chanina lo sagid lo malich. It's also impossible that Rabbi Chanina would have died and never have been the Rosh Yeshiva. Because the Chiyava, kanicha nafshi the Rebbe, because when Rebbe was on his deathbed, Amr Chanina bar Chama Yosef Barosh, he instructed that Rabbi Chanina bar Chama would be the Rosh Yeshiva. Uchsivbu b'tzadikim, and it says about tzadikim, v'sigzar omer v'yakom lach v'gomer. That, you just kind of say that you're going to do something and it will happen. And therefore, if Rebbe said that Reb Chanina bar Chanina, no, the opposite, that Reb Chanina bar Chama would be the Rosh Yeshiva, you can be assured that he would be the Rosh Yeshiva. So it's impossible that Reb Chanina bar Chama would have died before Rabbi Apis did and never have been Rosh Yeshiva. So therefore, it must be that what happened was Rabbi Apis died, Rabbi Chanina now became Rosh Yeshiva. Levi felt, okay, I can go to Bavel now, and that's what happened. Fine. Darash Levi ben Arda. So sure enough, Levi got to Narda, and what did he say? As we said earlier, Kalila Shari, that a Kalila is permitted to be worn on Shabbos. Now he doesn't necessarily say, what kind of Kalila, if it's made out of gold, out of silver, or if it's made out of fabric, I don't know. But let's just assume anything, any kind of Kalila. And guess what happened after he made that proclamation? Nafik esrin v'arba klile mikula narda. So then in Narda, when he made that proclamation, 24 women went out with their klilas on Shabbos. And guess what? Mechoza was not going to be outdone. Darish Rabba bar Avua b'mechoza klile shari, that Rabba bar Avua darshan that in Mechoza, that klilas, you're allowed to go out with them on Shabbos. V'nafku tam nesrei klile michad mevoa. That and 18 klilas just went out from one mavui, from one little area. There were 18 klilas, right? Because mechoza, whenever they come up, they tend to be come up in a way that we're describing how wealthy they were. They would have in their porridge they would have a lot of honey, right? We said that their clothing they would was very fancy clothing that they would wear. They were city dwellers. They were a little fancier. So in mechoza, just every block had 18 klilas that they were going out with. Okay, fine, very fancy. Amar Vyuda Amar Rav, said Rav Yehuda in the name of Rab, Shmuel Kamra Shari. So Shmuel would allow women to go out, or was it men? I can't remember. I think we were talking about women, but maybe... let's see. I don't know if it's talking about men or women, but basically there was this belt, this double. So basically, so there was this belt that was very, very fancy. Okay, and also, it could be made out of gold and silver. It could be like a gold and silver belt, or it can be a belt that's made out of cloth and has all sorts of fancy stuff in it. Okay. I think it's talking about a guy, actually. So, Ika de Amri de Aruksa. Okay, so those who say that Shmuel is talking about this belt that is made out of fabric, and has all sorts of, Rashi explains it's made out of fabric, and it has like these golden settings in there, and then have all sorts of fancy stones in it. Sounds pretty fancy, right? And Rav Safra explains that the reason why you can go out with it to Rosh Hashanah is because it's just like a golden cloak, and you'd be allowed to go out with that. Okay. Those who say that it was actually a belt made out of gold or silver, that you would be allowed to go out with it just like a belt of kings that is made out of gold and silver. And Rashi points out, and therefore all of Israel are the sons of kings, and therefore they would be allowed to go out with it. Okay. Ravina asked Ravashi, Kamra ilave hamyana mai. What if you put this very fancy belt on top of your real belts? What if you have a real belt to hold up your pants, and then you have this very fancy belt to be very fancy? So Rav Ashi responded to Ravina, look, you're asking me, can a person wear two belts? The answer is no, because the second one is going to be a burden, and it's going to be carrying Rosh Hashanah. Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, Hairisuka, a cloak, Isle mafrechaisa, shari vilo asir. If this cloak has like strings and stuff to kind of like tie it closed and secure it tightly around you, then it is permitted, but otherwise it might fall down, and then you will pick it up and carry it for Amos, and that would be a problem. Okay, we will hold it here for Daf Nun Tes. I hope you enjoyed Daf Nun Tes. Here is a recap. So we had started off with more of the tumah and tahara stuff from yesterday, right? So we started out with allegedly Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that even once you remove the clapper from the bell, it would remain tameh, because you could still use the bell to give water to a child, right? But then the question is, but does Rabbi Yochanan really hold that if you have a kli that's still usable but not usable for its initial purpose, that it would remain tameh? So we then asked from regarding the concept of amod v'na'aseh melachtenu, right? That Rabbi Yochanan seems to apply that also to something that became tameh from a mace, right? That if you have, we were talking about, let's say, a measure, a sa'ah, that touched a mace, and now it became tameh, and it breaks in half. Rabbi Yochanan's opinion would be, even though you could still use it for other purposes, you can't use it for its initial purpose, and therefore it would be tahor. So if that's the case, by the bell, since you can't use it for its initial purpose, it should be tahor as well. So the Gemara suggested just flip around the initial opinions and say that Rabbi Yochanan is the one who said that since you could take this bell and knock it against some earthenware and it'll still make noise, so it's still usable in its initial way, so therefore it would remain tameh. And we proved that this was in fact Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, that it would have to still be usable in the initial way, because we said that a shoe for an animal is able to be mukabel tumah. And the question is, what human purpose can an animal shoe be used for that would be able to be mukabel tumah? Rav suggested that you could drink from it in wartime. Rabbi Chanina suggested that you can pour oil from it to rub into your skin during wartime, whereas Rabbi Yochanan said that you would be able to flee in these animal shoes during wartime. So we see that out of all three of them, specifically Rabbi Yochanan is the one who it's important to him that it still has to be used for its initial intention and its initial way. We talked about this Jerusalem tahara thing. Rabbi Meir says that if you go out with it, you would be chayav a korban chatas because it's a burden and therefore it's carrying. And the Chachamim say that it would be pater aval asur, because even though it's an adornment, so you would theoretically be able to go out with it. However, you might take it off to show to your friends, and therefore it would be don't go out with it. Rabbi Ezra says it's completely permitted because only really fancy people are going to be wearing this, Ir shel zahav, and therefore fancy people are not going to take it off to show their friends. Therefore, it's completely mutter because it's an adornment. We talked about this klila, which was this like gold. Well, depends. There's two types of klilas. One is completely made out of gold or silver. The other one is made out of cloth that has like gold and fabric and has gold and silver and other fancy things woven into it. Rav says that it is forbidden to go out with it, and Shmuel says that it is permitted. The first way we wanted to explain it was that when it comes to the gold or silver version, everyone agrees that it would not be allowed because you might show your friend. When it comes to the fabric version, Rav is concerned you might show your friend. Shmuel is not, right? Rav says the main thing is this gold and silver parts, therefore you might show your friend. Shmuel says the main thing is the fabric part, and therefore you won't show your friends, therefore it would be permitted. The other way to understand the machlokas is lekula, that Rav Ashi would say that when it comes to the fabric version, everyone says that it's permitted because you're not going to go and show your friends. It's when it comes to the gold and silver version, Rav says it's also because you might take it off to show your friends, whereas Shmuel says, look, the gold and silver version is only going to be worn by very fancy people, and it's permitted because they're not going to take it off to show their friends. We talked about this fancy belt. Shmuel would say it's completely mutter. We have two versions of that. One is that it's made out of fabric, and it's like it would be similar to like this golden cloak that you'd be allowed to go out with, and therefore it would be permitted. The other way to understand it is that it's a belt made out of gold and silver, and we say, Shmuel says you're allowed to go out with it just like, it's kind of similar to like the belt that kings wear. Okay? Then we talked about a cloak, and we said as long as it has strings and you can tie it up so that it won't fall down, it's mutter. Okay, I hope everybody had a great time. I certainly did. Have a great day.